everyone, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and this is the Astral Library. And it is the end of June. It is, I believe, June 29th. So we are right at the cusp of when the month is over, which means it's time for another reading wrap up to see what the hell I read for this month. And honestly, I'm surprised on what's on this list because I've forgotten nearly everything. I don't know what it was about June, but it's just been like constant things happening. And I felt like I've had no break. And top that all off, I feel like I should be doing so many more things. So like this month has kind of been just like, it's been a lot. So I am so excited for it to be done and to go into July with a fresher mindset, with more of a plan and how to structure my days, how to structure my summer a little bit more so I can get started on my dissertation. That's another story. You're here to figure out what the hell did I read this month and like what was my thoughts and opinions. So let's go ahead and start with some statistics. So I have my story graph up and I got it set for June. So in the month of June, I read a total of 10 books, which totaled out to 3,344 pages with a variety of moods, all kind of. So that is my spread of moods. It seems my biggest category this month was adventurous. My pacing was a mixture between 50% fast, 40% medium, and 10% slow. So mostly faster paced books, which I think definitely tracks in terms of like what I read. And the majority of my books were between 300 and 499 pages. So no like ginormous books this month, and everything was fiction, which is true. I didn't read any nonfiction this time. And in terms of my genres, I'll give you a little overview. I read a total of 6 fantasy books, 4 romances, 3 LGBTQI books, 3 mangas, 2 young adults, 2 sci-fis, and 1 miscellaneous of a lot of things. I would say a pretty widespread month in terms of genre. Of course, I stuck mostly with fantasy. That just tends to be how it goes. And my average star rating was 3.85. So not my lowest month, but definitely not my highest either. I will say I only managed to DNF 1 book and it's a soft DNF. Did not hard DNF any books. The only soft DNF is one I'm just gonna come back to a little bit later because I just wasn't in the mood for it. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. But let's go ahead and dive into all the books I read this month and kind of what my general thoughts are on them. So the very first book I read in June was Concrete Roses by Angie Thomas. Now, this is the prequel book to The Hate U Give, which was one of my favorite books. I adore that book so much. I think it's so important. I think everyone needs to read it. And it's actually the book I taught in my English 1C class this quarter. So I was loving that book. And as I was rereading it for the class, I remembered that I had Concrete Roses on my shelves and it was actually on my 24 for 2024 challenge. And so as I was reaching the end of that book, I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and pick this book up, especially because a lot of my characters were loving the person in The Hate U Give that this book follows, which is Maverick, Star's father. So like I said, this is a prequel book that follows Maverick's life as he finds out that he is going to become a father. The thing about Maverick is that he is heavily involved in gangs and drug selling, so he is going to have to figure out what is important to him and is he going to continue in this dangerous lifestyle when he has a son to raise. It was a really fun story. I have a whole vlog where I read this and kind of give my thoughts as I'm reading this, so I won't go into too much depth here, but I really enjoyed this book. My only kind of like issue with it is that it felt very much YA. It felt really young in terms of just like the audience it was trying to reach, and I had just aged out of that audience. So like at times I was like, okay, this is a little too much for me, but overall, I still had a lot of fun time and I ended up giving this, I believe, 3 stars, which I think still a solid read for a book that I felt was too young for me, but still had a lot of fun with. The next book I read this month is actually not one I have. I was in Ohio for about 4 days at the beginning of June, and I was visiting a couple of friends and had some downtime. So what better thing to do than as a bookish person to go spend some downtime in a library? And so that's in fact what I did. I think I ended up spending maybe about 4 or 5 hours just in a library reading, and I am so glad I did, because while I was in that library, they had a book that I can't find at my local libraries, and that was Artificial Condition by Martha Wells. So last month I started the Murderbot Diaries with All Systems Red, and I adored that book. I loved it so much. I believe I gave it 4 stars. The only thing that knocked it off was that the ending was a little rushed, but I was still so excited to continue the series, right? And so I'm wandering this library. I look on the shelves and what do I see? Artificial Condition. And when I tell you, I snatched that book up and I sat my ass down in a chair and I read the thing cover to cover, and it was so good. All the complaints I had about book 1 were solved in book 2, which is not something that happens often. But I feel like the story in Artificial Conditions could be contained a lot easier in the 150 pages that this series tends to run in, and it was just so good. I love the characters we got. We got another AI that was kind of weird, kind of fun to see interacting with Murderbot, especially because they were so standoffish about them, but also built some sort of friendship. It was so good. It was so good. And then Murderbot is just Murderbot, and we love them with every part of our being. They're great. Want them to watch so many TV shows, and the fact that they're watching TV shows with their new AI friend. So good. So great. Like I said, I read that thing cover to cover, and I read it so fast. It was a great way to not only waste some time, but also just like get further in the series. And it's just cemented that Martha Wells and the Murderbot Diaries is gonna be one of my all-time favorite series. I could feel it in my soul that I've enjoyed these first 2 books so much. I cannot wait to continue them, and I will in fact be buying them because my library is here. I don't know what it is about California library system. It is in fact inferior to the Ohio library system, and that hurts my soul a little bit because I'm not moving back to Cleveland anytime soon. If any people in Ohio are watching this, and I just want you to know your library is superior. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's just chef's kiss. Always so good. If it wasn't clear already, I gave this book 5 stars, and it earned every one of those stars because I had so much fun with it. And I'm hoping in the next book we're getting a reunion with the crew from book 1 because that's what it kind of like hinted at happening, and I'm just here for it. I want Murderbot to have friends. I do. After I finished Artificial Condition, I still had about like an hour to kill before I was supposed to meet up a friend. So I decided I was gonna be that like cool kid that you see in all the TV shows that goes and reads in the manga aisle and like sits on the floor and reads. And what I ended up reading was the first 3 volumes of Nina the Starry Bride by Rikachi. I will be 100% honest, what drew me to this series was really the cover, which I'm sure I have popped up over here. And it was just, it's so pretty and it was so striking that even when I was wandering the aisles, I like immediately was drawn back to that. And I thought, okay, this is gonna be short and sweet. The synopsis sounded kind of fun. Let's just sit and read this. And I have to say that I am definitely hooked on the story after reading those 3 volumes. Like I had like 10 minutes before I was supposed to meet a friend, and I was still sitting there trying to finish the last volume that they had before I had to leave. And I think this is definitely gonna be a series I'm continuing. So Nina the Starry Bride is about a girl, Nina, who is an orphan. But what's unique about Nina is that she has these very unique eyes, hence the title Starry-Eyed. What makes them really unique is that they look exactly like a princess's who has tragically died. And so one day Nina is about to be sold into slavery when she is kind of taken by a prince at the palace who essentially tells Nina that she is going to be the replacement princess and be married off to this other kingdom to prevent war. And Nina grew up on the street. She has no idea how to be a princess. So she not only must figure out how to survive in the situation, but also figure out who she can trust as she's like thrown into this very tumultuous situation that could very easily end in her death. And her only ally is the second prince, who is also in a very precarious position within the royal family as he is older than the crown prince, but has none of the political power to actually rule the throne. It was a very cute story. I did not get in very far, only enough to like dip my toes into this world, really. I can tell just from those first 3 volumes that this is a world that's gonna get really complex in its storyline and kind of in the political intrigue going on. Where we ended in volume 3 is we are going into that new kingdom and she is interacting with the person she's supposed to be marrying, and it also seems like a very complex character that isn't quite what it seems. I'm excited. I had a lot of fun. I do have the next few chapters on my computer. I haven't sat down to read them yet, but you best believe that I'm going to, because I almost want to let this build up so I have more volumes to binge. But this great story combined with like those vibes of like sitting in the aisle reading was just was so good. It was so much fun. Every now and then you gotta be that it girl, and that was my moment to shine. And I'm just happy that no one else was really in that section, so it was great. I believe I gave each volume somewhere between 3.5 to 4 stars. It was consistently good and consistently interesting. So I have that tradition that when I'm traveling or when I'm like hanging out in the pool, I don't like to bring a book that I'm like super duper worried about just in case like something happens and it gets ruined. So the series I continuously read in that setting is Sue Grafton's Alphabet series. And so this was no exception. While I was on the plane to and from Ohio, I picked up the next installment, which is P is for Peril. So this is the, oh God, what number is P in the alphabet? It is number 16 according to Google. Book 16 in the series, which, hot damn, I'm almost there. There's 26 letters in the alphabet, and there's only 25 because she never wrote Z, which is so sad because she's been writing these books to the 80s and she died before she could do Z. But we're on P, and I have to say that I like this one a lot better than I think the last couple I read. I did not really care for O is for Outlaw. I thought it was nice learning more about her husband, but I didn't really care. I think N was okay. I think I liked a couple characters in N, but overall it was just meh. But P was a lot of fun. So in P is for Pearl, we are following Kinsey as she is kind of hired onto a case to find a doctor who has been missing for 9 weeks. And he just randomly left work one day and never made it home. And no one knows what happened to him. And so Kinsey is hired by his ex-wife to kind of dig in and see what is going on. And the deeper Kinsey digs, the more things start not making sense, especially when she starts getting involved between the doctor's ex-wife who hired her as well as the doctor's new wife who is a lot younger and also is trying to figure out what is going on, and Kinsey's kind of in the middle between two sides. Also, there's a really interesting side plot in here where Kinsey gets involved with 2 brothers who apparently murdered their parents in cold blood and like made off with their fortune. And one of them, so we has set their eyes on Kinsey in a romantic way, and so that adds a bit of tension, and it was really, really interesting to read. And I think when the major plot was like hitting its lulls, that side plot really kind of like kicked in and I think just drove this story forward in a lot of ways, and that really added to my enjoyment to this book. I ended up giving this a 3.75 or a rounded up 4 stars for this 16th entry into the series. After I got back from Ohio and was kind of just hanging around the house, I wanted to focus on books that either featured LGBTQIA characters or written by queer authors. I was still filming my 24 for 2024 challenge vlog, which was posted before this. I'll thing up here so you can go check it out if you like. But the last book I picked up for that one was actually Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. So if you don't know, Gideon the Ninth is the first book in the Locked Tomb series where we are following Gideon, who is an indentured servant to the Ninth House, which is this mysterious family that is in charge of the Locked Tomb, which is said to hold the biggest, darkest secret of the realms. However, Gideon wants nothing more than to escape the planet and to escape the Ninth House, which does not view her in the best light and has actively been antagonistic to her whole life. And so Gideon wants to get the hell up out of there. However, in the midst of her attempt to flee, she is stopped by Harrow, the heir to the Ninth House throne, and has a very, very tumultuous relationship with Gideon herself. She essentially blackmails Gideon into helping her in an upcoming competition where Harrow will be trying to win immortality. And she says that if Gideon helps her succeed and get immortality, she will let Gideon go free of service without anyone having to hunt her down. So Gideon finds herself reluctantly roped into Harrow's schemes and trying to survive what is going on in this competition that all the houses are at as they're working towards becoming these all-powerful immortal beings. But the deeper they get into this competition and the deeper they get into the mysteries kind of at the location, the more Gideon is noticing that things are not quite right, especially when other competitors begin dying. What can I say about this book? Again, since I talked about this in that vlog, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this. I will say though that I was kind of disappointed by this book. I wanted to love it so much. Everything about the kind of description and the way people talk about this book just let me know that like I was gonna really like click with it and enjoy it. And then as I sat down to read it, I just wasn't having a good time. I was forcing myself to read 100 pages every time I picked up this book simply to make sure that I kept going forward. And when I tell you, there were multiple times throughout this book that I felt like I was going to DNF it. And the major reason for that is that Tamsin Muir's writing did not click with me, and I don't think fit for the tone of the overall novel and what was going on in this book, especially with Gideon as our main character and our semi-narrator is this kind of like very brash and crass and kind of crude character, and that's a lot of fun. I love a character like that. But it was paired with this really formal and kind of dry writing. Top it all off, this book was so slow. I was disappointed. I ended up giving this 3 stars, and I am in fact gonna DNF the series. I will not be continuing on, especially because I went to go like read the wiki of like what happened in this series, and when I tell you, I was confused. This is a really complex series that I might like on a reread later on when I have a better grasp of like what to expect. So this is gonna be a DNF series for now. I might pick it up later and try it again. I might give this book a reread when I'm not in post-summer brain and my head is fried, but we will have to see. So after that, I decided that I needed to have a book that I was just gonna be a bit of fun, just gonna head empty, vibes only. And so what I picked up was Spellbound by F.T. Lucan. And just look at this cover, everyone. Just gorgeous, gorgeous. I love this book. This book had, if you saw my mid-year freakout tag, this is the book that had my favorite fictional character in it, which was Antonia Hex, the queen, the boss bitch. I love her. She was great. I had so much fun reading Spellbound just because it was sweet and cute and light, and all the characters were likable, all the characters were funny, but especially because of Rook and Antonia, which really kind of like drove this book forward. So Spellbound follows our main character, Rook, who has no magic of his own, but grew up around magic with his grandmother. Unfortunately, prior to this book began, Rook's grandmother has died, and he has been excommunicated from the magical society and forced to live kind of in poverty as he's thrown into the foster care system. And Rook has been missing magic so much. He craved being around it, and the fact that he's been entirely cut off has been devastating. And so in trying to recapture that magic and to show that he belongs in that community, he creates a device that he calls the Spellbinder, which is a device that is able to detect and map out the ley lines of the city. However, what Rook is doing is entirely illegal, as the magical government that kind of regulates them all keeps the information about magic under lock and key, and if Rook is found out that he has created this device, it can get him in a lot of trouble. But the major problem about Rook's device is that because he doesn't have any magic and he cannot see the ley lines, he doesn't know if his device is actually accurate or not. So he decides that he's gonna get a job for the most powerful sorcerer in town, Antonia Hex. And so he ends up begging her for a job, and the two slowly start to form a relationship, and she kind of takes him on as an apprentice. I ended up giving this 4 stars. The only reason why it lost that last star is that F.T. Lucan's books are often just like a little too contained for me. I wish they developed a little bit more. It was a very quick read. This is a very short book and something you can easily read in a couple of days. I still highly recommend it. Now, after I finished Spellbound, I wanted something just a little bit of a palate cleanser, something a little bit easy, still kind of following that like spooky vibe. And I had went book shopping with a friend, and of course, I bought books of my own, and one of the books I bought was The Deep Dark by Molly Knox Ostertag. So Molly Knox is an author I've read before. She actually wrote The Girl in the Sea, which I believe I talked about on this channel. I think I talked about that in my Beginner's Guide to Graphic Novels. So this is her newest book, and I just picked it up because like, look at the spooky cover. It's so pretty, it's so cute, and it was queer, of course. So this is following our main character, Mags, who has a secret that she is hiding from everyone around her. And Mags is about to graduate high school and she's kind of left in this limbo as she is forced to keep this secret that is really holding back her life and not allowing her to get close to anyone. And Mag has just kind of been in a funk. She doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. She doesn't know how she's going to continue living her life or if this secret's going to kill her before she even gets a chance to live. In addition to that, Mag's life is further complicated when her childhood friend comes back into her life. The problem being that when Mag was a child, she told her friend what the secret was. And now she is left trying to keep that secret hidden as well as trying to figure out what does she actually want out of life. And is she ever going to let anyone close enough to either create a meaningful relationship or to help her out of this depression that she's found herself in. This was such a cute read. It was so good. It was even though this is a very chunky read, it reads really fast. And one thing that was really fascinating about this book was Molly Knox's use of color, because like I said, we have Mags who's in this like very depressive episode. And so a lot of this book is in black and white with spurts of color when we like go to the past when Mag's life was a little happier. It was just really, really cool to see kind of like that visual representation of how Mags views her life as well as what her life used to be like. I end up giving this 4 stars. I love the world. This is set in kind of like desert California and just we have a variety of characters. Mag's love interest is a trans woman who's super cute and super fun. We have a lot of various characters. This definitely kind of like dives into like Mexican lore and mythology. There's a spooky, creepy creature in this, and just the vibes were so good in this book. I really like Molly Knox's storytelling. I think she does it in a really good way, and I think the relationships she creates are always really sweet. And to see a little more serious side going on in this as we're dealing with very serious topics, it was really well done. So highly recommend this. Another good graphic novel that if you're like thinking about starting this, pick this one up or borrow it from a library. I know graphic novels are really expensive and can be hard for like the amount of time you spend reading them. So the library is always a really great spot to kind of try them out to see if that is a genre that you are going to like to invest in. After I finished The Deep Dark, I wanted to dive back into F.T. Lukens. I had another book on my TBR from them, and that was Otherworldly, which I believe is F.T. Lukens' newest publication. And just look at this cover. Again, another gorgeous cover from this author. Love it. Love to see it. This, unfortunately, was the only book I ended up giving a DNF. I think I got 130-ish pages into this book, so almost the halfway point before I decided that I was going to give this a soft DNF. So a soft DNF for me is that I am just not vibing with the book for whatever reason, and I know it's entirely based on my mood. And so I'm not going to say I'm never going to read this again, but I'm going to try to pick this up when I'm in a bit of a better mood and a bit more kind of tolerant to whatever issues I was having with this book, because I know I was otherwise really enjoying the plot. So Otherworldly is set in a town that has been trapped in a 5-year-long winter with no end in sight, and we are following a couple characters in this. We are following Ellery, who comes from a family that heavily believes in the supernatural, though Ellery themselves is very much a non-believer and has been forced to leave their family farm to go work in the city to try to help their family stay afloat. Our other main character is Knox, a supernatural creature who works directly under the Otherworld Queen that is in charge over life and death. And so Knox is really interesting as a character because every time he enters into our world, he is left with no memories of his previous time in our world, and he has to kind of relearn everything as he's attached to whoever he makes a contract with. And so once Knox's previous boss is killed for trying to find the formula for cracking the code to immortality, Knox is not ready to let the world go, and he runs away and ends up running into Ellery, who is working a shift at the small town diner that Knox was a frequent visitor of. And they both kind of get trapped together into this plot to figure out what is going on. Why has the Otherworld Queen suddenly cut off contact from the world and essentially started this 5-year winter with no end in sight? I was really, really interested in that plot. I really, really liked Knox as a character. I thought he was fascinating. What was kind of putting me off was I didn't quite vibe with Ellery as a character. They were just really negative at every turn. And when you're kind of like on the brink of a reading burnout and kind of on the edge of a reading slump, the last thing you want is a character that is just like negative about everything. Even like moments that like didn't make sense, Ellery was just very much negative and like lashed out to other characters like Knox. And I was not there for it. I was like, I don't want to read this right now. And so I had to make the decision, like, do I push through and read more of this story that was getting really interesting in the plot, or do I set it down and come back to it when I'm in a better mood? And I decided that I was just gonna soft DNF this book, and I will probably pick it up in another couple of months just to see how I'm feeling, to see if I can get over the gripes I had with Ellery's negativity, or if it is something that is going to actually prevent me from finishing this book, which I'll be really sad, because this would be the only F.T. Lucan book that I did not enjoy and that I did not finish. Now, like I said, I was on the edges of a reader burnout, and getting a book that I had to DNF was not helping. So I decided, okay, I need to just pick something up that is going to be fun, that I'm going to enjoy, that I know is gonna be a good time. And that, of course, was the Patricia Briggs Mercy Thompson series. So this is the 7th book in the series, called Frostburn. As I was going to reread this series, because I had a few of these on my like continue on series shelf, I picked up the book I thought was the next one, which was, I still have it here, which was Fire Touch, which is actually the book I've left off in terms of the series. I have never finished Fire Touch. And so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna dive right back in. And then I'll read what I thought was like the books after it. I read this book before. This is the last book in the like continuous series. I haven't read it, but I apparently read this book, and I was reading the synopsis and I was like, I don't remember anything about this book. Like at all. I could not remember the plotline. I could not remember like the major moves that happened. Even though the book after it, which was Nightbroken, I remember the plot of this book. Nothing. And so I was like, do I read it? Do I skip it? But I thought, you know what? Let me go ahead and give it a reread. Like, is this a book that I forgot because I didn't like it? Or is this a book I forgot because I just got overwhelmed with everything else? I enjoyed this book. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. So this picks up right after Rivermarked, which is my least favorite in the series. And we are following Mercy Thompson as she is out and about on Black Friday and kind of hating her life as she is trying to take her stepdaughter to do some shopping and is kind of like having to brave the old Black Friday crowd. As she's out shopping, she ends up getting in a car crash, and as she's trying to call her husband to let him know what happened, she cannot get a hold of, and it turns out that the entire wolf pack has been kidnapped, and Mercy is left trying to figure out who took them and trying to figure out how to get them back. This was a lot of fun. I ended up reading this in just like a couple days and just like tearing through this book. I read this while I was in the pool. It was just good time vibes all around, you know? And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed this book, even though objectively it is not the strongest in the series. The plot in this book is kind of all over the place, but not only do we have this like kidnapping plotline that like takes up the majority of the book, there's also like some issues going on with vampires towards the end that just felt a little rushed. And that's sad because I love the vampires in the Mercy Thompson series. They are so fascinating and they have such interesting characters. One of my favorite things to read about this series. And to see them kind of like shoehorned in at the last, I'm not kidding you, like 100 pages, maybe not even that, where we're trying to like, here's all these vampires and this subplot that you didn't know was going on. Ha ha ha. That was kind of a mess, to be honest. But what really kind of made me still give this a 4-star despite that was just the interactions between the characters is always so much fun. Patricia Briggs does banter really, really well. We had this whole moment in the book towards the beginning where Mercy's kind of reminiscing about her time with Braun, who is like the head alpha of like all the wolves, and her childhood growing up there and just like the antics she pulled on him. And just like reading that small section just made me realize how much I really love these characters. Like every character she's introduced, I've had like strong attachments to, and I think really kind of like help build out Mercy's life as a character. Mercy feels very real because she has this long past that is brought up by people and she is teased about and even teased about events from other books. Patricia Briggs does banter and does character building very, very well. And I think that's what really kind of keeps me going in the series because I love Mercy herself as a character, but I also love everyone she interacts with and getting to see them kind of all connect together and kind of reminisce about events that happened. Even though this is very much a serial series where you don't necessarily have to read the previous books to read and enjoy this book, you get so much more from that experience and kind of like knowing all the little inside jokes because it just makes everything so much more fun. And it's what keeps me engaged for every book that comes out. Now, I have one more recommendation for you guys, and that is actually a fan fiction I had read. So the past few months, I just haven't been reading as much fan fiction as I normally am. I've hit a slump in it that everything I'm reading, I'm not really enjoying. And it's kind of put me off on like trying to find fan fictions I'm like obsessed with. But this one, oh my God, this one was so good. It reignited my love for the couple. So this is a Harry Draco fan fiction called Return to Sender by J. Cray. It was just so cute. So this fic takes place in the summer between 5th year and 6th year, where Harry is just going through it. He has just lost his godfather, no one is talking to him, and he is just desperate for any connection he can make. He ends up writing a letter to Sirius, who he knows is dead, but he sends it out anyway because he is just hoping for someone to respond. And of course, who gets that letter but Draco Malfoy, who is also going through it this summer with his father being in jail, and just the sense that something is going to go wrong. And when he gets Harry's letter, at first he is unsure of what to do, but when he reads the desperate plea Harry is making for some sort of connection, for anyone to answer, Draco decides to send a reply back. And that opens up a relationship where they are exchanging letters back and forth and growing closer and closer. It was the perfect amount of like angst and fluff and just like happy moments because the letters between them are so cute and so fun. I feel like this author did a really good job of characterizing Harry and Draco by having them have these like personas more or less between the two of them that allow them to kind of like cross those barriers and to learn more about each other without like having their own prejudice get in the way. This author also knew when to like let that go and to like when to have the identities revealed in a way that allowed the relationship to grow further. One thing about like anonymous relationship and like secret identities is that usually the secret identity gets dragged out for so long, and I'm just so bored of it. This was like the perfect amount. Like, we have the secret identities, but then when we need to know who the person is, we need to know, and we are going to move forward. And this relationship definitely has its ups and downs. Not only are they forced to kind of face their own prejudice they had for the other person, but also learn how to come together in a world that really doesn't want to see them together. And that really kind of addresses the issues and traumas that both these boys are facing. It was so good. I was obsessed with it when I was reading. Like, did not want to put it down. Stay up to 3 in the morning, obsessed with it. Go check it out. I'll always have the link in the description down below. But that is everything I read for June. Those are all my recommendations, all my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you guys read in the comments down below. What was your best book of the read? Do you have any fan fictions you really love? Do you have any mangas you really love? What books did you hate? What books did you love? What did you read this month? I am so excited to know. Also, if you made it this far in the video, I have a question for you guys. So I recently made a community post and a poll on my Instagram that has kind of floated out the idea of doing a book club. So I just want to pose a question here for anyone who didn't see that Instagram story or who missed the community post. What are your thoughts? I wanted to do a book club. I think it would be fun. We'd pick a book every month, probably more in the fantasy sci-fi genre, but I'm also open to other things. So just an idea, an inkling. What do you guys think? You can leave a comment down below letting me know your thoughts, or you can go to the community post and I believe you can still put a vote in. So you can vote yes, I'm interested, maybe, or no, I'm not interested. No pressure either way, but I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!